Let's see. Chrome. Okay, there we go. Thank you for that introduction. As you said, my name is Vivian Wan. I am a undergraduate at Tufts University, and I am going to be presenting my research on uh, institutions conducting research on music therapies for Parkinson's disease and related neurological symptoms. So let's get right into it. My, ooh, this is okay. Just as an overview of what I'm going to discuss today, this is pretty standard. I'm going to go through the background, discuss my method of finding this research, the findings of the institutions, and then a discussion and a quick Q&A afterwards. So for some background on topics in Parkinson's is a dopaminergic dysfunction disease caused by dopaminergic dysfunction, that leads to bradykinesia and resting tremor and speech symptoms, uh, which is slowness of movement, tremor, and weakness of the voice. So there are varying symptoms and severity in Parkinson's disease, which make it a very uh, difficult disease to treat from patient to patient. There's usually not one prescribable answer for the symptoms and the full profile of each patient. Another aspect of Parkinson's that is addressed less in formal literature is the mental well being of the patients and the caregivers themselves, because watching the ability to function in daily life dissipate as many of these patients do is quite difficult. And anxiety and depression scores increase drastically for those experiencing or related to those experiencing Parkinson's disease. Uh, the existing treatment landscape for Parkinson's is more heavily focused on pharmacological treatments directly addressing dopaminergic dysfunction. And while this is, of course, incredibly important, there are fewer treatments specifically targeting the mental and motor symptoms and alleviating those, uh, which is why I was interested in music therapy. There are 10 million people today who suffer from Parkinson's, and that metric is going to balloon to 25 million by 2050, according to the British Medical Journal last year. And I think it's incredibly important that we have different treatment options and a diversity of prognoses for those experiencing this pretty life changing disease. So, for some background on potential music therapies for Parkinson's, uh, rhythmic auditory stimulation, or RAS for short, involves using sound cues and regular rhythmic musical motifs to address motor dysfunction by connecting the neural pathways related to music and motor and bypassing the dopaminergic dysfunction that can affect movement in motor in Parkinson's patients. And it results in improved gait and timing and reduced depression and anxiety amongst participants in several pilot studies, which we'll go more into depth in later in this presentation. And group singing intervention, which you can see in the picture on the right. It involves regular meetings, so building a community with those um, participating, and can improve singing in general, can improve vocal loudness and quality amongst Parkinson's patients, as well as having generally social benefits for a disease that is otherwise quite isolating to those experiencing it. Um, so we can move into the method with which I use to approach this study. I For the search process, I used primarily Google Scholar in conjunction with the web pages of each institution that was producing this research. And I, of course, have an English language bias, as all of the literature reviewed was in English, and the institutions are thus potentially um, primarily from English-speaking countries, though I did review research from not places where English is not the predominant language, but uh, those I expect are of the minority of the literature that is produced in those areas. My objectives were to understand the research landscape of music therapy within Parkinson's, to understand the institutional role of in this landscape from institution to institution, and to garner general research interests in different areas, regions, and try to look for patterns in these three aspects. Um, I also paid closer attention to institutional structure itself, so understanding the role of the institution in affecting the lab's research, and the distribution of institutions across geographical and size range. And I narrowed down the institutions I focused on by study topic, mainly with RAS and group singing interventions, uh, though I did include some relevant adjacent research like wearable RAS technology or online applications of either of these therapies. So the institutions I analyzed are listed below. I thought this might be a nice reference to have, but this is, yeah, I focused on these 10 institutions from around mainly North America, but also from different corners of the world. Seoul, South Korea, Australia, and Germany being the main uh, institutions from outside of North America. So, now to dip into my findings, um, these are observations that I made based off of my understanding of the literature from those previous 10 institutions on the previous slide. Uh, the first thing that I noted was Western predominance. So, of the 10 institutions analyzed, 6 of the 10 are from North America. There are 2 in Eurasia, so that's South Korea and um, Germany, and 1 in Australia. This is partially um, likely due to the emergence of neurological music therapy being rooted in Colorado in the 90s with Colorado State University and the research of Dr. Tout in pioneering music therapy for neurological diseases. Uh, Also, accreditation institutions for music therapy are more formalized in Western nations, are more rigorous. Um, the the CBMT, which is based in North America, so that's the Certification Board of Music Therapy, is located in the United States and offers testing and accreditation for across the world, though other nations like the UK and Australia do have their own accreditation institutions. But again, that further emphasizes the Western focus of formalized music therapy. Uh, I also noted that there was a primarily psychotherapeutic focus on music therapy research in China versus a neurologic focus in North America. So by that meaning that like China and South America focused predominantly on um, the psychological use of music therapy, whereas um, it was in North America it's treated as something that can affect neurological symptoms and diseases like Parkinson's disease. I also noted, excuse me, I'm dealing with a bit of a cold. I also noted that the projects were generally on the smaller scale end. The volume of research was large, but there's generally a call for further research at the end of every article I reviewed. Um, and all of these articles generally had a very small sample size of 2 studies out of 23 reviewed, there was a sample size of less than 50, and the almost all of these studies were labeled as pilot studies or feasibility studies, suggesting to me that the the project size needs to increase in order for there to be a significant uptake in the use of Parkinson's in clinical settings. The use of music therapy for Parkinson's in clinical settings. Excuse me. I also found that there were distinct research areas even within the landscape of rhythmic auditory simulation and group singing interventions. Uh, so I've categorized these into pure science versus applied science. So um, pure science, understanding the neural pathways behind the impact of music therapy on Parkinson's. So, uh, a, one example of this research comes from Hanover University. So, they publish an article called "The Perception of Time in Music in Patients with Parkinson's Disease," and understanding the processing of musical syntax that compensates for rhythmic deficits. So, these are really important baseline studies for applied science. They're connected. Um, Also under pure science are the pilot studies. So some of these come out of Western University in Ontario, Canada, and BRAMS, which stands for the International Laboratory for Brain and Musical Science, I think. And also under pure science is building a theoretical framework for music therapy, and this is a lot of the older work um, for music therapy for Parkinson's that emerged from Colorado and Colorado State University in the 1990s, with the research of Tout et al. To um, build this baseline. And interestingly, Tout ended up moving his research to the University of Toronto, where he continued to focus um, on music therapy, which is why there's fewer publication emerging from Colorado now. Uh, in addition, and building off of the pure science areas, are applied science. So mechanical engineering is an increasingly important area in music therapy, with the research from Boston University's Neuromotor Recovery Lab focusing on wearable rhythmic auditory simulation devices, um, and engineering a way to automate these devices. In addition, the University of Melbourne, in group music therapies, they applied on a large scale the music therapies that are theorized under pure science. And also under applied science are many of the feasibility studies that are aiming to test clinical applications of RAS and group singing. The fourth and final pattern I noted in my findings section was that there was a heavy technology focus in the last 5 years, and that ranges from online therapies, likely due to the emergence of COVID-19 in 2020, um, and automated and adaptive RAS, and this is largely coming out of Boston University's Neuromotor Recovery Lab, but it's very promising for further democratization of these resources. So those are the findings, and now we'll get into the discussion. So, my primary thought throughout understanding the findings from my research was that this area, as with many areas, would benefit from more collaboration amongst these institutions. And as I was thinking about the possible benefits of such collaboration, and these include but are not limited to the mitigation of potential cultural biases. So, one study, I think led by the University of Melbourne, Irons et al., was an international feasibility study and cultural understanding study with the UK and South Korea, in addition to Australia, um, the leading scientific team that tried to test, excuse me, group singing interventions in different cultural settings and found different rates of efficacy amongst different treatment pools. So that is one avenue that could be further exploited, the mitigation of potential cultural biases. Also, um, scaling these research studies could be easier over international lines because there would likely be more people with homogeneous forms of PD in international settings, and different teams could share the workload of applying and applying their different um, one treatment and determining the outcomes. Uh, like I said previously, this could lead to more randomized controlled trials, especially in rhythmic auditory simulation, which um, you can to understand the more about the neural pathways controlling rhythmic auditory simulation, and also bridging the distinct research areas uh, amongst these different institutions to build a more holistic picture of the true impact of rhythmic auditory simulation and group singing intervention in Parkinson's. However, as good as this collaboration sounds, there are, of course, potential limitations that are likely what is currently barring further exploration of international collaboration. So, primarily, international funding and difficulty in long-term collaboration. Funding across international borders is really fuzzy, and there is very little precedent for it besides Irons et al., which is on the smaller side of a large-scale international study. And the fact that many of these studies are looking for more longitudinal understandings, and that collaborating over a long period of time is quite difficult, especially as it relates to funding. Another limitation is a mismatched rigor of licensure requirements. As I mentioned earlier, it's the UK and Europe and the global West have more formalized licensure requirements of music therapy that are not available in other parts of the world. And maintaining identical procedure over international borders would be quite difficult as a result of that. And amongst the scientists and the music therapists administering the potential intervention. And thirdly, the nature of Parkinson's disease is that it is a very heterogeneous disease. There are very few people who present with exactly the same pathology, and finding homogeneous forms of PD to solidify any notions that we might have about the impact of any intervention is difficult. Potential solutions to these limitations in collaboration, excuse me, wow, are intervention through the World Health Organization, which runs an arts and health program. With the support of international diplomacy, it is much more likely that international collaboration across borders is more feasible. But of course, in order for that to happen, more media attention would need to go to music therapy in general and its specific role in Parkinson's. Um, and thirdly, as with every field, artificial intelligence definitely has a role in um, music therapy for Parkinson's disease, especially with RAS. There are some labs already trying to produce. um, Excuse me. Wow, I really can't stop coughing. Um, that are trying to exercise artificial intelligence in practical forms of neurological music therapy. So in RAS, that looks like an AI that is able to take a patient's gait patterns and customize the rhythmic cues that are given to them in order um, to further personalize and refine the treatments. Um, So, finally, these are just some people that I would like to thank in helping me complete this research. Um, Dr. Mitchell Kosek, who helped me through uh, the authorship of my paper and guided me through the process. Dr. Elizabeth Stegemoller, who answered some of my questions regarding funding and the photo. You can find the other citations and references in this presentation at that um, website below. And I think with this information about music therapy and its potential in Parkinson's, I hope we can find a better way for the 25 million people in 2050 that will be living with this disease. And with that, that concludes my presentation section. And if anybody has any questions, I would love to answer them.
Hi, Vivian. It was like a good presentation, and the topic is really amazing. And yeah, so I just like have one question, and that will be like, can music therapy induce neuroplastic changes in patients with Parkinson's? That would be like a neuroplastic changes.
Sorry, could you repeat your question?
It's can like music therapy induce neuroplastic changes, neuroplastic in
Yes.
patients with Parkinson's.
Yes, some of the studies that I reviewed seem to suggest that music therapy increased neuroplasticity in the sense that it bypassed the basal ganglia function. And uh, I'm to be perfectly honest with you, I am less familiar with the nitty gritty specifics of the neural pathways. But what I can tell you is that um, the the research that I review suggests that yes, music therapy, especially rhythmic auditory stimulation, can induce neuroplasticity that can bypass other functions that limit motor function uh, in the brain and aid
Yeah, that makes
motor
sense.
function.
Yeah, because that's a reversible condition and a process, so it definitely makes changes in that. And my next question would be like, how does music therapy influence the dopaminergic pathways, as you mentioned earlier, involved in Parkinson's? Like, can you just explain me the pathway for the dopaminergic?
Right. Um, Music therapy doesn't directly address the dopaminergic pathways in Parkinson's. Um, it more so addresses uh, the motor function and the symptoms of Parkinson's. So it's less so a root cause treatment and more a symptomatic treatment that can alleviate the day to day lives of and experiences of those living with Parkinson's.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, this is also one of my important topic of conversation and discussion. Even I had choose this during my study, but not the music therapy. It was something related to some other kind of like video therapy, and it also like adds as a position in that like with the audio therapy.
Yeah, yeah, I think rhythmic auditory stimulation is very important, I think, as a part of neurological music therapy. It has a lot of potential for neurological disease as a whole.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Vivian.
Thank you for having me.
I just enjoyed the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivian Wan from Tufts University, United States, and sharing comments from Dr. Sania Sadaf Khan, recommending you the things and explaining the situation.